You ever try to fight 35 guys at one time, Teach?
Take your head off, boy, before I knock it off.
So 1955's Blackboard Jungle's main claim to fame is that it introduced Hollywood to a little musical movement called rock and roll. Anything you read about it now will mention how it's remembered as the first movie ever to feature a rock and roll song, Bill Haley and the Comets' immortal Rock Around the Clock. But it's obviously much more than that, and it's probably hard to imagine now that writer-director Richard Brooks' 1955 film expose of juvenile delinquency in the classrooms of New York shocked the authorities and audiences of the day. The BBFC refused to give it a certificate until 6 minutes of violence and threatening dialogue was removed, and it apparently led to teenage violence in cinemas across Europe. Let's check it out. So Blackboard Jungle, based on Evan Hunter's 1954 novel, features an immaculately cast Glen Ford. Here he's the idealistic teacher trying to make a difference in an inner city school populated by students the system's long since forgotten about.
Is there no way to get through to those kids? Is there no way to make them understand?
You'll find a way.
Now, well, what if I don't? What then? And what's the point of teaching if kids don't care about an education? And make no mistake about it, they don't.
And it's here he comes up against teenage gang ringleader, played brilliantly by Vic Morrow, who starts by causing class disruption but will ultimately overstep the line to such extents as abusiveness, emotional blackmail and ultimately knife crime.
Well, are you big enough to take me down to principal's office? Because that's just what you're going to have to do. You're going to have to take me. Well, come on, take me! Come on!
It's a real shame that many of those things were initially seen as far-fetched and over the top back when it was first released, but the themes of out-of-control students and an oblivious administration proved to be something that would remain a reality even today, several decades later. Even though the idea of an exasperated teacher trying to get through to his students has cropped up many times since in films such as The Substitute and Dangerous Minds, you'd think they'd lose a bit of their potency, but I don't think that's the case here, and it's mostly down to a cast that's pretty much pitch perfect. We'll circle back to Glen Ford's teacher in a minute, but my favourite performance in Blackboard Jungle is Sidney Poitier in the early throes of what would be one of the Hollywood careers. He's awesome here as Ford's prized pupil whose initial reluctance to use his influence to help his teacher is broken down once another side of him is revealed and he becomes the class peacemaker. Poitier was in fact 28 years old, playing a high school kid. Blackboard Jungle was instrumental in making him Hollywood's first black box office star, and the film as a whole does a good job of accurately reflecting the social nature of a ghetto community school. Guys, I'm Stephen at Real Classic Film Reviews. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. If you're new here and a fan of great movies, then give that subscribe button a click, and if you're already subscribed, I just want to take the opportunity to say thank you. It does mean a lot to me. Let me know if you've got any review suggestions for me in the comments below. Now, Blackboard Jungle also does a great job of showing the frustrations of an outdated teaching model applied to a challenging multicultural school environment. Ford's exasperated teacher is faced with an intolerant, authoritarian principal and fellow colleagues who are worn-down veterans of their profession, each in their own way unable and or unwilling to find a way to reach these students.
You hate the kids, you have contempt for them, you condemn them.
What about you, Zola?
I'm a fumbler. I'm not doing any better than the rest.
Well, what are we supposed to do?
Only a fellow teacher, Mr. Edwards, who he befriends, played by Richard Kiley, comes close when he brings his prized record collection in to try and inject something different into his lessons, with ultimately disastrous and heartbreaking results.
Hey, anybody want to hear this record, huh? Hey, clap hands. Here comes Charlie.
So with the film being set in an all-boys school, the female parts are all adults and include Anne Francis as the pregnant Mrs. Dadier, who is also targeted by the youths, finally sending Ford over the edge. Now, I'm a big Glen Ford fan. I love him in this and The Big Heat, and he's always good as the desperate man up against it. Here you really feel his desperation and frustration. I love how his surname Dadier gets twisted into the very 50s Daddy-O.
Daddy-o. Daddy-o. Daddy-o. Daddy-o. Daddy-o.
He's an ex-military man who soon discovers that the school is worse than many army situations he's had to deal with in the past. Directed by Richard Brooks, who isn't a massively well-known filmmaker, with this film and the underrated 1966 western The Professionals and 1958's Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, the standouts amongst the 26 films that he made. For the era, the racial attitude of Blackboard Jungle's still pretty shocking, with Glen having to confront racial slurs in class, and even the assault on a female teacher early in the film still being pretty close to the bone, and a far cry from the teen angst of other social issue films of the time, like that same year's Rebel Without a Cause starring James Dean. Now, I'm not a teacher, so I can't honestly vouch for the authenticity of the whole thing. And yeah, it is a movie and so has to feature some drama, and it has to get its point across in 110 minutes. So it's probably a greatest hits of slum school incident. Are things going to get tied up in a nice neat knot? Will this gang of unteachable yobs allow themselves to be taught? And will Ford have to teach A-level arse kicking to gain the respect and the control of his class? All this and more will be answered when you watch 1955's Blackboard Jungle. Go check it out.
Yeah, I've been beaten up. But I'm not beaten. There's a big difference. I'm not beaten. And I'm not quitting.